Great. Okay, folks. So thank you for being here. We're going to get started. So good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to kick off day 2 of the 2020 Women in Data Science Berkeley programming. As my colleague Amy Neeser mentioned yesterday, this event is held to celebrate women and data science, particularly women in data science. And this event at Berkeley is part of the annual WIDS, Women in Data Science, and worldwide conference that's held at over 150 locations across the world. So thank you so much for being here and participating in this global event. So my name is Erin Foster. I am the service lead for the Research Data Management Program at UC Berkeley, which is a partnership between Research IT and the library. We help Berkeley researchers manage data before, during, and after their research, and we partner with many organizations across campus to offer consulting and training on research data management and many other topics. So of course, first, I want to thank our sponsors for this event. This has been a wonderful collaboration. So thank you to OneIT, the D-Lab, Berkeley Research Teaching and Learning, Research IT, the Berkeley Research Data Management Program, the Berkeley Library, the Berkeley School of Information, and of course, Berkeley Computing Data Science and Society. And I also want to thank our planning committee. So I'm a relatively new person to UC Berkeley, and it has been an absolute pleasure working with these folks and learning more about the amazing work they do and their groups do across campus. So you'll hear from many of us throughout this series of events this week. So thank you to Alicia, Amy, Claudia, Doris, Iberia, Kelly, Liliana, Liza, Muskan, and Reza. And next, WIDS has a code of conduct which we plan to follow for our event this week. So the WIDS conference seeks to support all participants from across the world and in an inclusive, safe, and welcoming environment. All participants are expected to be considerate, respectful, and collaborative, and will refrain from demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior in speech. We do have an anonymous reporting form that you can feel free to use if you need to report a code of conduct violation, and there will be a link to that in the chat. So we will be monitoring that actively throughout the week, and so please use that if you need to. And now it is just some quick housekeeping. As you may see, we are recording, so feel free to turn your camera off if that makes you more comfortable. And these recordings for today, yesterday, and then tomorrow will be available after the event. So you can catch up on them if you weren't able to make any of the other events. Please stay muted while others are presenting, and then please enter questions in chat as the talks go along. We will be collecting those questions for answer during Q&A, so feel free to enter them as they come to you, and we'll be happy to talk about them. And if you feel called to, please tweet at WIDS Berkeley and use the WIDS 2021 hashtag. So with that, it is my pleasure to hand it off to my colleague, Kelly Rowland, who will introduce our keynote speaker for today. So Kelly, take it away.
Erin, thank you. I'm really excited to be here today. This is my second year with WIDS Berkeley. I was a grad student at Berkeley and worked with Research IT for some time, and now I'm up at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory at NERSC, the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center. And today it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for the student day this week, Dr. Debbie Bard. She is the group lead for the Data Science Engagement Group at NERSC at Berkeley Lab. Her career has been very broad. It spans research in particle physics, cosmology, and computing on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. She got her PhD at Edinburgh University and worked at Imperial College London and Stanford Linear Accelerator Center National Laboratory before joining the Data and Analytics group at NERSC, where she was a big data architect and focused on data intensive computing and research. And now she is the group lead for the Data Science Engagement Group. And today she'll be talking to us about her work and her career path and how she got to where she is. So welcome, Debbie.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Let me just get my screen share up, get my slides up. Here we go. All right, so yeah, thank you for that nice introduction. I'm really honored to be here today. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you all. To tell you a bit about what we do in supercomputing. And a little bit about how I got there, as Kelly kind of alluded to, my career path has not been very straight and narrow. I've had a rather winding career path, and I want to talk a little bit about what that's like and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. So that's basically what I'm going to be talking about. I want to first of all introduce supercomputing, because I think this is something that not everyone is familiar with. And there may be some misconceptions perhaps about what a supercomputer is and what we can do with them. I want to talk about why supercomputing is important for science. And in particular, I want to talk about how supercomputing impacts experimental science, because that's something that I'm really excited about. I want to talk about how we can advance science using advanced computing and the opportunities that are part of that. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about why I care and the twists and turns of my career path that brought me to this point. Okay, so I'll start off talking about NERSC and about supercomputing. So as Kelly said, I work at NERSC, the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center. It's up the hill in Berkeley Lab, up the hill from the campus. And we are one of the Department of Energy Office of Science user facilities. So the DOE Office of Science is actually the largest funding agency for physical science research in the US, and it covers a whole range of different science areas, from climate science to genomics to fusion energy to cosmology and particle physics and nuclear physics and computing. So NERSC is one of the user facilities in the Office of Science in the computing area, computing division. And we are the mission high performance computing and data facility for the Office of Science. Now, what this means is that our mission is very broad. We offer support to all DOE funded scientists and projects who need supercomputing scale resources. We deploy large systems, compute systems and data systems. This is an image of Cori, our main supercomputer that's on the floor right now. We name all our supercomputers after scientists, after prominent scientists, because that's very much our mission. We support a very broad range of science. And because we are the mission supercomputing center, this means that any DOE funded scientist can apply for time on our systems. This means that we have a huge range of science that we support. We have over 8,000 users each year as part of over 800 different projects. And these are users that come from all states in the US and from around 40 countries around the world. So the science and the work we do is really both national and international. And we support a lot of different types of science. As you can imagine, there's a lot of different things that people want to do with our systems. This includes large-scale simulations and data analysis support. And I'll talk a little bit more later in detail about what that means. So each year, NERSC, as a computing center, provides a lot of computing hours for the scientists who need it and a lot of data capacity, data storage. Each year we provide, or the last couple of years, we provide with Cori about 9 billion compute core hours. What this corresponds to is just about all 7 billion people on 3 million different Earths doing one calculation per second for a year. So this is a lot of compute power. It's a lot of compute cycles. We're able to support a large amount of calculations that is all deployed in support of science and science research. And we also have large amount of storage capability. We have about 180 petabytes of data storage. But one of the things that I'm going to come back to again and again as I go through this talk is that simply providing compute cycles and disk space is not sufficient to support science. Research computing really needs a lot more than that, and I'm especially with supercomputing, and I'll come back to that in a bit. So the scientists that use NERSC for high performance computing, this is really the use of supercomputers and our big data systems to study scientific problems that are too big to fit on a standard computer. So these are the kinds of calculations that you might be able to run in practice on your laptop, but would take a year to complete or something like that. It's really for problems that need the kind of scale of computing that we can offer with a supercomputer. So this might be trying to do modeling of different materials, new types of materials to design better batteries, more efficient batteries and more efficient solar panels. It might be running simulations of the climates to understand how extreme weather events are impacted by climate change. It might be running models of supernova explosion, or trying to understand the nature of dark matter and dark energy in the universe. And it might be running models of how proteins work and how proteins interact with other molecules. And this is some work that's been particularly relevant this year. We've had a lot of scientists doing this kind of modeling for COVID-19 research, which is something we've been really excited about. Okay, so we support science, but it's important also to point out that we are a research computing center, and we're funded as a user facility in the computing sciences in the Office of Science. So this means that we have a dual mission. So we advance science, but we also have a mission to advance the state of the art in supercomputing. So when we are designing a system and bringing in a new system, we collaborate with our vendors, with the computer companies, years in advance, years before the system delivery, because we want to be able to deploy these systems that are pushing the boundaries of what you can do with computing technology, with the hardware and with the software. And we also want to make sure that we are deploying systems that scientists can actually use and use effectively. So we need to sort of balance these two needs, having some state-of-the-art computing that can also do everything that the scientists need. And so I mentioned Cori is the system we have on the floor at the moment. Perlmutter is the next system that we're bringing in right now. In fact, I've got some pictures of that in a minute. But this is our new system. And again, this is a multi-year process. You know, it takes 5 or 6 years to go from the mission need to the actual design of the system and the installation, because we have very highly optimized hardware. We also have very highly customized software and programming environments, again, to support the science applications. And we have to be able to bring data into the system and share data out from our systems, because we're very tightly coupled with the workflows from other DOE user facilities. And I'll be coming back to that again later on. But really, I think, you know, we have these massive systems, you know, very impressive compute power. But I think probably the most important part of what we offer at NERSC is our staff. We have a really fantastic team working at NERSC. They're all experts in supercomputing and in domain science. They provide advanced application and system performance expertise to users. And this is a really big part of what we can do as a research scientific computing facility, is offer advice and support to scientists who need to use these big and complex systems. So this is kind of a snapshot of the infrastructure that we have. It goes beyond simply the compute system, which is this. This is Cori. You can see all these rows of cabinets. This is really a huge compute system. It has something like 13,000 compute nodes and a total of over 700,000 compute cores just within this one supercomputer. We also have various types of storage. We have disk-based storage, we have tape-based storage for long-term archiving, and we have some SSD-based storage for high efficiency I/O. And we also have infrastructure for edge services. This is a Kubernetes-based platform called Spin, where we offer support for what we call edge services. The kind of things that sit outside the supercomputer, but still need to be within the NERSC infrastructure, like databases and web portals. And I'll talk again a little bit more about that in a minute. So I mentioned our next system is Perlmutter, again, named after a prominent local scientist. This is being installed right now. And these are images pictures that were taken just in the last couple of weeks. So when I say it's being installed right now, I really do mean like at this moment. We have experts from our vendor, HPE, who are in there like doing the cabling and putting the system together. So you'll hear, I expect, more about Perlmutter in the future as we bring it online, but it's going to be a powerful machine. And it's our first system that is GPU accelerated. So we have both CPU only nodes and nodes that have GPUs attached to them to really provide the scale of computing that our users are asking for. We also have a really sophisticated Scratch file system that's going to be all SSD based. That should give a really good performance for data reading and writing, and also a very sophisticated interconnect, which connects all the nodes together. And that's very important. Because a supercomputer is, it's a little bit more than just the hardware. I mean, if you look up what the definition of a supercomputer is, you go to Wikipedia, they'll tell you that it's a high performance computer. It's something that does better than your average computer, which is a little bit general. The way I think about a supercomputer, particularly in the context of research, is that it's a scientific instrument, in the same way that a very sophisticated, powerful telescope is a scientific instrument, or a very high-powered microscope is a scientific instrument. That's how I think of a supercomputer is in the context of research. It's a highly specialized tool for doing science with. And that's part of what we have to do at NERSC, is make sure we're designing systems that are capable of doing science with this advanced technology. So just to go into this a little bit more detail, how do you build a supercomputer? Well, you start with CPU. So you start with a processor, you add some storage, then you add a network card, and perhaps you add an accelerator like a GPU. And then you package all these together on a node. This is a compute node. And so when we talk about our Cori system having 13,000 compute nodes, this is what we're talking about. These nodes are then packaged together on a blade. You might have 2, maybe 4 nodes on a blade, and then the blades are then packaged together in a rack, and these racks go into these cabinets, like you saw the pictures of for Cori earlier. So this is sort of the basic infrastructure of the compute. Then these nodes are all networked together via a very specialized interconnect. And this is what makes up Cori. This is what makes up a supercomputer, with the addition of a high performance parallel file system. And so, this is, there's a subtlety between what a regular compute cluster is compared to a supercomputer. Because you can put compute nodes together for your desktop machine, and then you can put them in blades, you can put them in racks. But the key thing that makes this, to my mind, a supercomputer is really, it's 2 parts. It's the interconnect that connects all the nodes together, and it's the high performance storage, because that's something that's really, to my mind, makes a supercomputer super. And the reason we have to do this is because of the workload that we support, the kind of compute calculations that we need to be able to run. So we need to run calculations that require all these tens of thousands of nodes, hundreds of thousands of compute cores, all working in unison on the same problem. And so this means they need to be able to exchange information. These aren't necessarily compute nodes that are operating independently. They have to be working in concert, in unison, to run calculations for these large-scale simulations or data analysis. Cori has to be able to work as one compute unit. And for this, you need to be able to connect all these compute nodes in a very specific way so they can communicate very quickly. So for a supercomputer to be super, you need to have a screamingly fast interconnect. And this is what that looks like in practice, is a lot of cabling. And in fact, when we install a new system, it maybe takes a day or 2 to bring the cabinets in, but then it takes days, maybe 10, 12 days to actually do the cabling, to actually connect everything up properly. The interconnect is a really important part and a very specific part of the supercomputer. And this is what the back of the cabinet in Cori looks like. You can see the amount of cabling here. This is just within 2 cabinets. This is what's required to provide this interconnect, the physical cabling. And then there's also a lot of software involved in making sure that runs efficiently as well. So the second part of what makes a supercomputer super is being able to distribute data. So we need to be able to distribute petabytes of data and millions of files to all these compute cores with no latency. Because again, we want this to be efficient. We don't want a compute node to be sitting waiting for data to get to it. So to do that, we have to specialize file systems. We need to scale out our file system to hundreds of servers to have a parallel file system. Then this can be accessed over the high-speed interconnect. And this is one of the reasons why we have these very high performance file systems. So this up here at the top, this is the Scratch file system for Cori. This is all the file system for one supercomputer that is connected via the high speed interconnect. So you can see this is a lot of storage, and you have really nice fast access for it. And then we have these other types of storage, from longer term disk-based storage to very long-term data archives on tape that also have to be accessible efficiently from the big systems. So scientific computing, we need to have compute, we need to have storage, and we need to have this interconnect, but really scientific computing requires a lot more than just simply this hardware. We also need to be able to connect to the outside world. So we need to be able to connect to the network in the center and to the wide area network. In our case, we connect to the outside world via ESNet. ESNet is the Energy Sciences Network. It's another Department of Energy user facility, and it's basically the internet for science. They provide very high performance networking between scientific facilities, and it's what enables us to be able to bring data in and take data out of our center really efficiently, really quickly. So we need connections to the outside world. We also need to have connections to other storage systems that we have, and connections to our tape archive. We also need to have be able to move data around in and out of our storage fabric from the outside world to all these different storage areas. We also need to be able to serve up this data and give access to the outside world through web portals. So we need to have the capabilities of science gateways. These are all things that scientific computing needs. It's more than just simply the calculations. There's this whole ecosystem around it that's necessary for it to really work well. And so this so we have compute, we have all these different types of storage, and then we have external connections. And this is kind of how we think about it when we're thinking about a supercomputing center. But also, we need more than just the supercomputer, and more than just the storage, and more than just the connection to the outside world. Actually, this is something I had no idea about until I came to NERSC, but the amount of infrastructure and just power and cooling required to support a supercomputing system is huge. And I literally do mean huge. So this is some images of some of the power and cooling that we have at NERSC. These are air handlers here on the bottom left, and you can see these huge air handling units. They're big. I've lived in apartments that are smaller than these air handling units. It's really a huge amount of air cooling that's required. We have these massive fans that are required to circulate the air. We have huge electrical substation that handle megawatts of power coming in to be able to power these systems. And when we're doing construction, when we're bringing in a new system, we also have a lot of facilities work, and that can involve bringing in what is frankly the largest crane I've ever seen to do some of this facility work. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes on behind the scenes to support this kind of computing. But we're very proud that we're able to run one of the most energy efficient computing centers in the world. We don't have any air conditioning, we don't have any mechanical chillers. We're able to take advantage of air cooling and evaporative cooling to keep our systems chilled and running efficiently, which is, that's something that was very important and we're very proud of. All right, so we have all this infrastructure. We have all these power and cooling, we have these sophisticated compute systems. What are people actually doing with them? Well, the traditional idea of the kind of application that runs on a supercomputer is like this gigantic whole machine simulation. It might run for days and it might produce like a single number, or it might produce like a huge simulated data set. And the kind of apps that this might be would be a climate simulation, or maybe some calculation about the structure and interactions of a single atom or a molecule. And we do indeed support those kinds of applications. We do have that kind of workload, but we also have a lot of other things running on our systems. The typical day is much more diverse, or maybe I go so far as to say unruly. If you remember, we have 8,000 users, and they're all using our systems, not all at the same time, but there's a lot of work that happens on our systems. And every day we typically have over 1,000 compute jobs running simultaneously on Cori. And this is everything from, a very large scale, perhaps a full machine job, to single core jobs that we also support. We have everything from simulations that are time insensitive. They can run pretty much at any time. The scientists would like the results back as soon as possible. But if they have to wait a couple of days, there's nothing particularly is going to be lost. And then on the other hand, we have very time sensitive calculations that need to be done to support an experiment that's running right now. So this is a lot of different types of workload that we have. And I think NERSC has one of the most diverse workloads in the world for a supercomputing center, because we have such a broad mission to support science research. As you can imagine, this is a complex scheduling problem. Trying to make sure everything fits on our systems and is able to run in a reasonable time is tricky. But we spend a lot of time trying to optimize this problem. So now I want to talk a little bit more about the parts of our workload that I'm most interested in, which is this real-time experimental analysis workload. So we support, as I said before, many users and many projects from the Department of Energy's user facilities. And in fact, about 35% of the projects we work with say that the primary role of their project is to work with experimental data. And what they need when they come, and we're seeing this as an increasing user base. Actually, we're seeing the number of projects that come to NERSC is increasing, and also what they need from a supercomputing center is also increasing. And this is largely because technology is advancing, and as technology advances, we can deploy more sophisticated compute systems. But also scientists are developing higher resolution detectors and experiments that produce more and more data, and it's very rich data. And so we're seeing more and more experiment teams that really do need to have access to supercomputing scale resources to be able to do their science, to be able to do their experiments. And there's a couple reasons for this. One is that they have large amounts of data and they need HPC scale analytics, including machine learning, by the way. But also a lot of experiments combine analysis of their experiment data with running simulations and analysis of their simulation data. And so for this, you really do want to have all your data co-located in the same place and all your computing in the same place. It's much more efficient. So the co-location of our large amounts of data storage and HPC scale computing resources is really vital for the success of these experiments. But it's fair to say that not all experimental science needs a supercomputer. But when it does, what they need is more than just the infrastructure that I talked about before. They need more than just compute hours and disk space. They also need a lot of other aspects of this. So the needs go beyond compute hours. They need a lot of compute hours. This here is a graph estimating how much compute power is needed from experimental facilities alone in the next 5 years, and you can see it's growing quickly. But they need more than just compute hours. They need a lot of data storage, so they have very high data volumes. Today, these teams that work with experimental data, they use something like 20% of our compute hours, but they use nearly 80% of our storage. So they have a high amount of data, and the way that they need to move that data around is quite specific. They need to move a lot of data into NERSC and out of NERSC as they run their analysis workflows over multiple locations, at their experiment site and at other computing sites. They also need, as I mentioned before, real-time and interactive access to do their computing while their experiment is running. They have to run their analysis workflows typically over multiple computing sites. They might do it locally. They might do some computing in the cloud. They might do some computing with NERSC and some other big computing centers. So they need to be able to run a resilient workflow over multiple locations. And they need this whole ecosystem of persistent edge services. They need to be able to provide databases, visualization tools so they can look at their data, workflow managers, web services, web portals so that they can share their data with a wider community and maybe with the general public. And there's all these things that have to come together to allow experimental science teams to have success at a computing center like NERSC. And this is something that is really encapsulated by what we call the super facility model. This is an ecosystem of connected facilities with the addition of the right software and the right expertise to enable these new modes of discovery, to be able to apply this kind of compute and networking power to the experimental science. And this is an important point. I've talked a lot about the hardware, but simply connecting an experiment to a network and connecting that network to a supercomputer is not really, it's not sufficient. It's not going to result in success. What you really need is to have the software the right software tools and the technologies in the right places and the right people working on this. So they have expertise in the domain science, in the network, and in the computing. That all has to come together to support experimental science. And that's how we are working with the super facility model at Berkeley Lab. I lead a project called the Super Facility Project at Berkeley Lab that is coordinating all the work that we're doing in the different areas of expertise to bring this together to make this successful. And I want to go through one example of how we're really helping a science team do their science more effectively by bringing their data to NERSC for some real-time data analysis. And this is an experiment that runs at the SLAC National Accelerator Lab, where I used to work, actually, over at Stanford. And it is an X-ray free electron laser. So this is one of the DOE user facilities. It's a very intense pulsed electron beam that acts as a kind of a very small scale and very sensitive, basically, microscope. So it's a very specific kind of microscope that allows scientists to look at the structure of molecules. And because it's a pulsed laser, they're able to look at how these molecules are moving around in time and create little movies. So it's like molecular movies over very short time spans. And this is cool because it allows them to see how different molecules dock together, how proteins dock together, and they can do some really cool science with this. But they create a lot of data, as you can imagine, and that data is occasionally too big for them to be able to handle locally. So this is when they come to NERSC. So the workflow looks like this. They have data acquisition, it goes to their local disk storage, and then is transferred via ESNet to NERSC, where they run compute jobs on our system. So this is where the analysis of the data happens, as it's fresh off the detector. The science team then can use our edge services to watch what's happening. They can see where the data is coming in, they can see how the compute jobs are going, and then they can look at the results and within just a few minutes, get feedback on how their experiment is going and adjust their samples, adjust their experiment parameters, so they know whether or not their data is any good and what the results are looking like. And this is really important, particularly for this kind of experiment, because this is a very valuable resource, and scientists are allocated not a whole lot of time to run on it. So they want to make sure they're making the most efficient use of their time on this really valuable piece of equipment. So this is some of the results that they've had in the last year. As LCLS2 came up to speed in August. Some of the first work was done in material science, and this is a screenshot from the team. They're all on Zoom because, of course, everyone's working remotely this year. They're able to use our infrastructure to have geographically separated science team all working together on this experiment with the team that was on site of the experiment and with NERSC. And this particular team was looking at a new type of molecular structure called tethrine. And another piece of work that we're really happy, really excited to be able to support was some work using LCLS to characterize and image the main proteins of the SARS-CoV-2 virus structure. And so again, this used the same kind of workflow where data was taken at the beamline and then brought over to NERSC, where it was analyzed in real time. So that was something we're really excited to be involved in. And this is what it looks like when they're doing this kind of work. It really hits all the points that I was making earlier about how experimental science needs more than just the supercomputing infrastructure. They need to have high-speed data transfer. They need to be able to run their analysis in real time to get feedback. They need to surge their analysis to a large part of our supercomputer, because sometimes they have a lot of data coming off the detector, and they need to be able to analyze all that data on our system. And they also need to be able to orchestrate their workflow. They need to orchestrate how the data is moving around and interact in real time with their results. And so, yeah, really excited about how this kind of model is coming together and how we're able to support experimental science with our supercomputing system. And so I'm going to now talk a little bit more about why I'm interested in this, because this is really something I'm very passionate about. I'm really excited about how we can help support experimental science with supercomputing. It took me a while to realize, but this is essentially what I've been doing for my whole career. This is kind of what I've been working towards through the various positions I've had. And at this point, I really do believe that you can ask new questions about science and ask harder questions in science, particularly, about the nature of the universe, about the nature of new materials, about biological and earth systems. You can ask harder questions if you can apply cutting edge computing and analysis techniques. And this is, I think this is really important. This is really why we do what we do. It's not just to provide computing resources for people, it's to be able to push the boundaries of science by offering new capabilities in data analysis. And I think that's something that's really exciting about data science for science, is that you can ask new questions of your data by applying data science techniques. But it took me a while to get here. I came to computer science in a rather roundabout way. Excuse me. My positions, as Kelly sort of mentioned in the introduction, have been various. I started off my career working in particle physics. In fact, I was working on a collider experiment where we were colliding electrons and positrons, looking at the difference between matter and antimatter. And so I went on from that to work in the field of cosmology. So I went from working with subatomic particles to looking at the entire universe as a whole, which is quite a different scale, trying to understand something about what the universe is made of, and using data sets from simulations and telescopes to try to understand something about the nature of dark matter and dark energy, a very different scale. And I went from there to work at a supercomputing center using research computing to advance a whole range of different scientific areas. So on the surface of it, these are very different career sort of choices, very different research areas. But when you break it down, there is underlying themes. So when I was working in particle physics, I was using a large data set from this experiment to I did a statistical analysis on that data set to try to understand what was going on. That was really data science with big data at the time. And then when I moved to work in cosmology, I was doing a statistical analysis of very large data sets. Just the nature of the data was different. So that was also data science with big data in the service of science. And when I now work in supercomputing, I really am doing the same thing. I'm doing supporting data science for science with very large amounts of data. And that's kind of the underlying theme for what I've been doing, is working in these different science areas, but using the same skill sets, really, and the same kind of analysis techniques to these different science areas. So this is really why I say that my career path has been rather winding. The positions I've had, I'm not necessarily obviously qualified for. I never studied particle physics in college. I did a degree in physics and French, but I never took a class in particle physics, but I went in to do a PhD and a postdoc work in particle physics. And then I went into cosmology, despite having never studied astronomy, frankly, never looked through a proper telescope in my life. And then I moved on to work in a supercomputing center, despite the fact that I've never really taken a class in computing. And this isn't something that I planned out. It's something that happened organically because I was following the things that I was passionate about and the science that I really cared about and the technology that I found really exciting. So that's the theme through my career. It's been using computing to enhance experimental science. Because as I said earlier, I really believe strongly that you can ask new questions about the nature of the universe using computing techniques. And it was this skill set that I developed in computing, in data analysis, and in communication. This skills are what allowed me to move between the different fields, even if I didn't have direct expertise in it. And that's kind of the what I want to spend the last sort of little bit talking about, is what I did and how I made those decisions. So this is me around 2008. I was very excited at this point about what my options were. What should I do with my life? Because I was working in particle physics, and the experiment I was working with had come to the end of its lifetime. It stopped taking data. What do I do next? And really, my thought process started off with space is cool. I like space. I like understanding something about the nature of the universe, dark energy and dark matter. That's interesting. I like playing with data. I'd like to stay in California. That was a very big part of my decision process. Cosmology seemed to be a good fit for all these things. But given that I'd never done a class in astronomy, given that I'd never really looked through a telescope, how am I going to get a job in this area? This is something that I really struggled with. And it was a similar kind of thing when I moved from cosmology to supercomputing. This is me in about 2015, very confused about what I'm going to do next in my career. Because working in cosmology and academia wasn't, I realized by that point that wasn't where I wanted to go. So what do I do next? What's my alternative? So I thought about what I enjoyed about my job, what I wanted out of a job. I like working with a team. I wanted to work with a bigger team. I really like working with GPUs, with graphical processing units. Working with new technology was fun. I wanted to stay close to science, and I wanted to have a reasonable work-life balance. And what does that look like? What kind of position does that look like? Can I be a data scientist that works close to science? Like, what kind of position can I have for that? And then I happened by chance to meet someone socially who was really cool. She worked at NERSC. The work that she did sounded really interesting. That seemed like a direction I wanted to move in. But given that I had never taken a single class in computer science, like, how was I going to move into this new field? And I think these are questions that everyone faces when you're trying to navigate career changes. And it wasn't necessarily straightforward. There's a fair amount of angst involved in it, but ultimately I wanted to be doing something that I was passionate about. And that's really what motivated me to make these switches in my career path. You know, I was asking myself questions about what can I do next? What am I qualified to do? Does that matter? How do I break into a new field? How do my skills apply to different areas? How do I make the case to convince someone to hire me in a particular position? And yeah, I was told by a lot of people about the downsides of this, that I wasn't following a traditional career path. I wasn't necessarily going to find it easy by switching roles. But really, like I said, the most important thing to me was that I wanted to be doing something I love, something I'm passionate about, and doing work in a field that I think is fascinating and that I think is important. And that really outweighed any of the other, inconveniences that were brought up. So I just want to talk a little bit about what I did to help get myself into a new role. And particularly given the topic of the next discussion around networking and mentoring, that was a really big part of what I did to move into a new field of work. So first of all, I'm a researcher. I did my homework. I did my research. That's very much the first thing I do when I face a problem. And part of that work was personal. I had to work through what made me happy in a position. And it was what makes me happy, not sort of what might be expected of me in a particular role. And I weighed that really highly in what I was looking for in a job. That was something I really prioritized. And then once I sort of thought about that, I did a lot of research. I read up in the areas I wanted to work in. I read textbooks, I attended seminars, I did what I could to learn about the area that I wanted to go into so that I wasn't completely unprepared when I got to it. Part of that research was really talking to people. I did a lot of informal chats with people who I thought had interesting career paths or had switched career. So I wanted to understand what was possible. Like, what was it really like to do that? Like, was it hard? What do they like about their jobs? What do they dislike about it? For me, that was very much part of doing my research. And this is sort of took the part of informational interviews, which I know is something that's often recommended for people to do. But also it was more casual than that. I talked to a lot of people I knew in my friendship group who'd done different things, and talked to them about what it was like switching career paths. It was really useful and interesting to do that. And that also, expanded my network, and I was able to get introduced to people who worked in my target field. And when I was talking to them, I told them that I was interested in working with them, and that's very important. And I was also able to show them and tell them how the skill set I had solved their problems, which was also a very important part of this. I had to define what I had to offer in moving to a new field. And that involved sort of reviewing my skill sets, trying to strengthen different areas of my skill set if I wanted to switch into a new area. and being really able to talk about what someone is trying to achieve, what the strategy is, what the goals are of the area that I wanted to move into, and to show that I understand that and that I can help with that my skills can help solve their problems. And it wasn't necessarily a straightforward path, but it's been incredibly rewarding. And that's really the best advice that I can give. I know particularly when I was an undergraduate and when I was in grad school, I was really worried that the decisions that I was making would set me in a career path for the rest of my life, and I'd be stuck there. And if I made the wrong decision, I wouldn't be able to, I would ruin somehow my whole life. And my message is that that's not necessarily the case. It's okay to change your mind, maybe multiple times, about what you want to do in life. And the decisions that you make in your early career or in your education don't define what you can do later in your career. You haven't wasted your time by taking courses that are not relevant. It's or honing particular skill set that you don't need to be sort of stuck in a job just because it fits what you think your career path ought to be. It's perfectly acceptable to have a very winding career path, and it's worth doing something that you're passionate about and finding what that is, and making sure that you get to it, because it's something that I've found really very satisfying. I really enjoy working with experimental science. I really enjoy the process of supporting science, and I really like working with really cool big supercomputers. That's something that I think is really exciting. And I'm excited about where our mission at NERSC is going to take us in the next years with our next system, and as we build up more computing infrastructure to support science. All right, so with that, I'll give a blatant plug that NERSC is hiring, and we also have internships available over the summer if people are interested in coming and learning a bit more about what data science for science is like. NERSC is a great place to try that out. Right, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you. That was a really awesome talk. We have one question so far in the chat, excuse me, which I'll kind of add my own little spin on. How do you suggest, Amy asks that, how do you suggest that we communicate the stories of the impact of this important work and the humans behind it, moving beyond numbers of cores and cycles? And I'm very interested in that because we support so much basic science research work, the outcome of which is not necessarily immediately visible.
Yeah, I totally agree. Science communication is hugely important, and we do tend to define our success, define our systems by the number of cores or the amount of compute hours we can provide, because these are numbers. They're numbers that you can quantify, the numbers that you can advertise, the numbers that perhaps our funding agency and our government understands, but it is not the whole story. So having science stories alongside that is super important. And so I gave just one sort of real science story there, but that kind of vignette about how we can support COVID-19 research on our systems, that sort of thing is really important to tell those stories. So we have a communications team in computing sciences at Berkeley Lab that help us write those stories. So they help produce stories that we can circulate, but also it's something that that can be really hard for non-communication professionals to be able to do. Communicating science is so important. For all scientists, not just people working in computing, but people working in all science areas. Communicating science is so important, and it's something we get very little training in, and it's something, frankly, that we do really badly generally. I think it's important. So I've personally taken training in science communication because I know I need to be able to do a better job of communicating the science and the stories, as you said, and Amy said, around the people behind what we're doing, because that's what the public connects to. They don't connect to numbers, they connect to the stories, and particularly the stories of the people who are working in these areas. So that's why events like WIDS, for example, is a really good one because we get to see some of the stories of all the awesome women who are working in these fields and learn more about what they're doing and their backgrounds.
Thanks. Yeah, I think those are, you know, all really good points, and that we could all use to brush up communication. Technical communications are very difficult.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work to be done in that field. All right. Oh, good. We have another question in the chat, or not a question, but thank you. A thank you note for you know, the really great advice and towards the end of your talk. I personally always think it's very helpful to see the winding paths that people take, because we don't often talk about that. We talk about where we are and where we came from, but not what that looked like. And so it's always really interesting to see what that looks like. So thank you very much for your time and giving that great talk this morning.
Great, thank you. I will say that the more I talked to other women, particularly in computer science, about what their career path has been, the more I realized that there is no such thing as a traditional career path. You know, what we think of is kind of the straightforward, you do this and then you do that, you go to grad school, then you do research, and then you sort of naturally progress. It's actually very unusual. Like, most people come at it from different angles, or they've switched, or they've found something they're interested in and kind of really gone after it. There really is, I think, you know, no such thing as a traditional career path, and it's important to hear that. I think it's okay. What you're doing is okay.
I found that a lot when I was in research IT at Berkeley and also at NERSC, that kind of it felt like home, because I felt like I was a non-traditional career path type of person, and everyone else was too, and that was so stunning for me. Yeah. We do have another question in the chat. Did you have to explain yourself a lot during interviews while you were changing fields, or was it understood? And do you have any advice for handling those conversations?
Yeah, I was always asked, why do you want to do this? You're in one area. Why do you want to move into this area that you're not obviously qualified for? And that was the big question. And I mean, the why was the thing. You know, I was able to make the case in a fairly straightforward way that I had the skills to do the job, but people really wanted to know why I wanted to do that. And so the way I handled that was to explain why I was excited about working in this field, like what it was about the science or about the technology or about the position that I was excited about. You know, it wasn't necessarily that I was talking down what I was doing before, but it was really emphasizing why I'm excited, why I'm passionate about moving into this new area. And that was really what people resonated with. You know, it wasn't a sort of going back to the communication thing. It wasn't the dry facts about you know, about what I was doing. It was that I was excited and passionate, and that I wanted to advance the mission of the place that I was moving to, and that I could see how to do that. That was what people responded to. And I think that's true in any job interview, you know, whether you're moving to a different field or not. Like being able to convey what you're excited about, that makes other people excited to work with you, and that's, I think that's inspiring.
I agree. I like to pull in speakers to events like this who are really excited, because I find that engages the audience the most. And so we've had some really great speakers last year and this year at WIDS Berkeley, because they're so excited about what they're doing. Yeah. And it just makes for a really good presentation and communication style.
Yeah, I love watching that. I love watching someone who's excited about what they're doing. They can talk about almost anything if they're excited about it. It's awesome to see how people's enthusiasm can take them to new areas, particularly in science and technology and research.
Absolutely. Well, I will thank you once again.
Thank you.
And I will hand things over to Liliana to open up our student lightning talks for the second hour of today's WIDS event. So thank you again very much, Debbie, and Liliana, take it away.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. Thank you, Debbie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liliana Cardile. I am the Industrial Relations and Events Specialist at the Computing, Data Science and Society Division. And before moving forward with the next part of today's program, I would like to echo what Erin said at the beginning of this event and share once again with you how wonderful it has been to plan WIDS this year with this particular planning committee. This is an exceptional group of people that I think embodies the excellence that Berkeley is about, the kindness, the competence, and if this is not enough for you, I want to say that everyone in this group has a great sense of humor. So it has been wonderful to work with these people, and I hope to repeat this experience next year. So back to the program now. As part of this year conference, we want to highlight the exceptional data science work completed by our students at UC Berkeley. So we now present a session of lightning talks that showcase completed and or in progress data science projects led by UC Berkeley students. Our first speaker today is Lauren Santilli. I saw her coming in. So Lauren, are you ready?
Hi, yes, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Awesome. Are you all able to see it okay? Great. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Lauren. So I'm a fourth year undergraduate here at Cal, and I'm studying data science. So I just wanted to go ahead and talk about my current in progress Bitcoin price prediction project. So this is the rest of my team that I'm currently working with. So I have two graduate students, Mathilde and Armand, who are both on my team. And then I also have Davis, Manav, and Vandita, who are undergrads working with me. And then we have an industry mentor who's a product manager at Anchain.ai. So his name is Francesco, and he's just been kind of supporting us throughout the course of our project so far. So really, what is our project, I think is a good question. And so cryptocurrency is very much a volatile space right now that has remained daunting to investors and the public alike because of its serious uncertainty. And so my group's objective is basically to create a platform that can correctly and efficiently predict the price changes in Bitcoin based on various different types of order book data and various social and market factors. And so ultimately, we want to create a platform that allows people who are not familiar to the cryptocurrency space to be able to understand kind of what's going on and how we expect future prices to change. So in terms of our user experience, we have three main requirements that we're looking to achieve. So first is, of course, the accuracy of our predictions, because if our predictions are not accurate, our model is not very useful. Also, we want to make sure that we have an intuitive user interface so that users are able to easily understand what's going on. And we also want to make sure that our data is very readable. So we want to make sure that when users are on our platform, they can make sure that they understand what model we're using and what parameters are going into that model. So in terms of our architecture, technically, we're going to take our order book data from three different sources. So this is IEX Cloud, Binance, and Coinbase. These are all different interfaces that you're able to use to trade Bitcoin or different types of cryptocurrencies. And then we're going to have a 24/7 data collector called Heroku that will be collecting this order book data, which will then be stored in our Firebase real-time data storage. And then there we'll be able to calculate all of our different relevant metrics and statistical analyses. That way that we can create our predictive machine learning model. And then this model will eventually be posted on Anchain.ai's website under their order book section, as that's what we're using for our predictor. So some of the technical components of our project are listed here. So our initial kind of hurdle to get over was finding features that did accurately influence Bitcoin pricing and our ability to kind of identify those and manipulate them. So we have been successful in doing that so far with the help of our mentor. And depending on how our model performs, we might go on to kind of identify different bad behaviors that we're able to see in the order book data. So this is essentially our plan. So we started out our project by doing a literature review and then going into some data exploration and visualization. And then now we're currently in kind of the new data gathering phase and the statistical analyses phase. And then once we complete these few stages, then we'll be able to finalize our models and we'll be able to create our user dashboard and do a live implementation. So once we're able to have this project completed by the end of the semester, then we're going to post it all on GitHub and make sure that it's accessible. So any future data scientists are able to kind of pick up our project right where we left off. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Nerissa Nance. Nerissa?
Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Okay, this is going to be a very different talk because I've got a lot going on and a lot to say in my scant 5 minutes. But in brief, I am an epidemiology PhD student here at UC Berkeley, and I'm also a senior analyst at Kaiser Permanente's Division of Research. Can everyone see my screen? Does it look okay? All right, great, awesome. Okay, great. So I'm just gonna launch into it. Okay, I'm gonna talk to you today about the causal roadmap and show you an application to antihypertensive medication data. So, whoop, there we go. So what we're excited about, you're all here hopefully because you like data or you're interested in data in some way. One thing in healthcare that we're excited about is using machine learning prediction algorithms in big healthcare data sets to provide personalized medical treatment to patients. But oftentimes what we have are these powerful prediction algorithms, but what we actually want to do is to answer causal questions with them. So we want to say, does drug X affect outcome Y? Or in the example that I'm going to use today, does antihypertensive medication use affect neonatal ICU admission? So in randomized trial data land, where we randomize a treatment to people, some people get it, some people don't, and then we prospectively measure the outcome, and we can feel pretty confident. Everybody's familiar with this because of vaccine trials, I'm sure, especially after COVID. You can feel pretty confident that what you're seeing is this causal effect between the treatment and the outcome. In observational data land, it doesn't quite work like that. You have a non-randomized treatment, and you have what we call in epidemiology and what they call in a lot of places confounding, which is that there could be other reasons that we're seeing this effect. And so one way to sort of think about this differently is through the causal roadmap. And in the causal roadmap, you first define your causal question and your causal model. You then define your statistical model in Estimand, and you link it to your causal model in Estimand, given your available data, and you state the assumptions that you would need in order to make this, this connection work. And only then do you perform your estimation and your inference. And I'm glossing over so many things. There's an entire course on this, but here you go. Once you do that, you can feel a little bit more confident that voila, what we're seeing is a little bit more of a causal effect between the exposure and the outcome of interest. And so the example that I'm going to use is hypertension treatment in pregnancy. So high blood pressure during pregnancy is bad. It can cause negative outcomes like neonatal ICU admissions for the baby. But treatment during pregnancy also carries its own risk, as you might imagine, treatment of anything, but hypertension is one of those things. And so the decision to treat or not to treat from women with moderately high blood pressures is currently left up to physician decision. And what this means is that in the electronic medical records, women are treated with medication at different blood pressure levels, just sort of naturally. Some doctors are treating earlier, some are treating later. And so if I were to define a causal question with this, we would want to know, will hypertension treatment at lower blood pressure levels during pregnancy affect neonatal ICU admissions? So you can imagine me randomizing women to receive treatment with lower blood pressure levels versus higher blood pressure levels. And we would want to emulate this randomized control trial using observational data. So again, how would I link this? Again, we have this observational data from Kaiser medical records of 13,000 hypertensive pregnant women who were treated at different levels. And what we want to represent is this causal relationship between anti-hypertension medication and delivery outcomes by emulating a randomized control trial. So we might say, poof, it's magic, don't worry about it, read it in the footnote, trust us, we made it happen. But if I were to be maybe more specific, we use machine learning to estimate the statistical parameter of interest. So in this case, we used machine learning ensemble superlearner to estimate inverse probability of treatment weights. And I can talk about that more if there are questions about it. But in order for this to work, we need to recognize that we're making certain assumptions. For example, we're recognizing that we need to assume that we're measuring and controlling for all of the needed confounding variables, all the other things that might be making this relationship happen. And we also need to make sure that we have data to support our measures of interest. But let's go back to poof magic, it just happens, or maybe we say that it's thoughtfully implemented causal tools that make it happen. And voila, the results quickly. We estimated causal risk differences. Causal risk differences are the difference in the risk of the outcome, in this case, neonatal ICU, in the treated group minus the risk in the untreated group. So as you might imagine, a risk difference greater than 0 is bad, i.e. the medication makes the outcome worse. And we found across the board that women treated at lower blood pressure levels were at an increased risk for neonatal ICU admissions. And I hope that piqued your interest a little bit in causal inference and what it's all about. I'll leave you with this quote: all models are wrong, but some are useful, and complicate it slightly by saying all models rely on assumptions, but some may be better at answering your question than others. Thank you.
Chloe Sue, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Erin, for organizing it. Very happy to be here. I'm Chloe, and I'm a PhD student in computer science working with Jennifer Lisgarden. And our group works on protein engineering. So I'm guessing probably most of you don't know a lot about proteins. So where do we need proteins? There are actually a lot of proteins in the world. This includes capsids for gene therapy. These protein capsids deliver particular genes into human bodies for gene therapy, or antibody engineering. Probably this has got a lot of headline because of COVID. Or enzyme engineering, where a lot of enzymes are used for food industry or for producing various chemicals. And enzymes are proteins that are also catalysts for various chemical reactions. So a lot of things that are useful are proteins, and protein engineering, broadly speaking, is the practice of designing better protein sequences to optimize for certain useful tasks. And how do people do protein engineering? Traditionally, there are two methods. One is lab-based directed evolution. So for protein engineering, we sort of visualize the landscape of how good proteins are as a fitness landscape, kind of like the one illustrated here in the lower right corner. And the task of protein engineering could be thought of as a walk around this landscape towards the higher up hills to find the more optimal sequences. So traditional methods like directed evolution is a greedy walk around this landscape, trying to find something uphill. Another existing method for protein engineering is physics-based rational design, where people start with first principles in physics and then build up a physical model to simulate what proteins would be the best. And now, since we can gather more and more data for protein engineering, we're able to allow data-driven predictive models for protein fitness landscapes based on machine learning. This is really exciting because the space of all possible protein sequences is combinatorially large, and traditional methods haven't been able to explore a lot of this combinatorially large space. With a predictive model from machine learning, now we have the hope to design much better proteins than the naturally existing ones. So data is really key for machine learning, as all of you probably know. And what data are available for predicting protein fitness? There are, broadly speaking, 3 types of data. There's universal data, where we have giant databases of hundreds of millions of protein sequences with every protein that came from a living organism. We also have evolutionary data of how proteins evolved over time. In addition, in the recent 5-10 years, people have also developed high throughput sequencing and high throughput assay technologies to gather a lot of experimental data in the millions range. There have been different machine learning methods for different types of data. For example, the large protein databases are a good fit for unsupervised learning, whereas evolutionary data is a good fit for weakly supervised learning, and experimental data correspond to supervised learning. But traditionally, people have been looking at these data types separately and applying different machine learning technologies for them. And my recent work focuses on combining these 3 different types together to come up with a model that can leverage all the information out there. And why is it important to study different types of models? Because different types of models for different data types can actually have very different costs. So recently, influenced by the big models from natural language processing, people have been training bigger and bigger protein machine learning models. The largest one to date uses 5,000 GPUs, and that's a cost of $1 million if we use the equivalent of AWS, and also has a carbon footprint equivalent to 10,000 cheeseburgers. So the existing methods that only use one type of data can be very inefficient. And we're hoping that by bringing together different data types, we can lower the cost and also make it more accessible to scientists and biologists out there. This is joint work together with my advisor, Jennifer Lisgarden, and also Hunter and Clara from our lab. If you have any questions or ideas for collaborating on proteins or designing small molecules or other scientific problems, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
And now Katie Byers. Katie.
Hi, everyone. All right, let me share my screen. All right. Hello, welcome to the Lightning Talks. I'm Catherine Byers. A little bit about me. I'm a senior at UC Berkeley, graduating in May. I'm from Fresno, California. I am studying data science and music. I'm a student researcher for the Discovery Program, and my family just adopted 2 kittens. This is them on the right. Hold on. Sorry, technical difficulties. Sorry, there it goes. Okay. So at the Data Science Discovery Program, you are connected with undergraduates for hands-on and team-based opportunities for exciting data science research projects and UC Berkeley and different companies in the Bay Area. It's a great way to get real-world experience and make a difference. And there are over 50 different projects you can apply for depending on what you're passionate about. And you can get units depending on how much you want to be involved. And I provided the link below. So the project that I'm doing is called Indigenous Brands and Social Movements. We are researching Indigenous trademarks and using data science to show that most of these marks are not owned by federally recognized tribes, such as Land of Lake Sputter, the Washington Redskins, but luckily in 2020, they decided that they are changing their mascot, so that's good. And we're analyzing data from the US Patents and Trademark Office, which anybody can access. So we're just putting that into spreadsheets cleaning the data and then analyzing the data, to protect ownership of indigenous trademarks and to encourage retiring these trademarks. And the results are that there are 9,500 trademarks, of which only 673 were filed by federally recognized American Indian tribes. So that's about 7% of marks that are owned by tribes. And so here you can see there's about 15 different tribes. So the Miami tribe of Oklahoma owns 263, and the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma owns only 42. And that's about it. Let me know if you want to connect and talk more about data science research. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening.
Doris Junglin Lee.
Hi everyone, I'm just gonna share my screen. Can everyone see my screen with the slides?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Hi everyone, my name is Doris Lee and I'm a PhD student from the iSchool and the RISE Lab at UC Berkeley. Today I'll be talking about some of the work that we've been doing on a system called Lux. And so Lux is an open source Python tool that makes it easier for data scientists to explore and discover meaningful insights from their data. And so we all know from the talks today that data plays an increasing role in the way that we make sense of the world and for making decisions. And so to discover valuable insights from your data, data scientists often have to go through this multi-step process from cleaning your data, exploring your data, as well as modeling and deployment. And within this workflow, exploratory data analysis is this very iterative process of asking questions about your data. So you often need to manually browse and inspect your data, as well as querying and computing statistics on your data. And finally, one very important thing is that you have to also visualize your data to get to these insights. And so in recent years, we've seen that computational notebooks like Jupyter have kind of become the go-to tool for a lot of data scientists to explore and visualize their data through the form of code. And in particular, what we've also seen is that when working with data inside notebooks, it's very common for people to use what's called a data frame. And so a data frame is essentially a data structure that can be kind of thought of as a table. So with a data frame, you can easily print out these objects within your Jupyter notebooks and kind of inspect the rows and columns that are in your data frame. But beyond just the numbers in these tables, so this is what we see on the right. How do we go from a data frame like this to a visualization to the left, which might reveal some interesting insights about your data? So we first have to kind of think about what this visualization should look like, what graphical encoding and marks we should use, and how do we process this data correctly to get to these visualizations. And kind of the next step that we have to do is then translate all of these details into code. So this very high barrier to visualizing your data often hinders the flow of data exploration. So to address these pain points, we've developed a lightweight open source Python tool called Lux. And the goal of Lux is to make it easier for data scientists to explore their data, even when they might not have a clear idea of what they're looking for. So first, by printing out any data frame inside a notebook, Lux recommends visualizations essentially for free to the users by providing this alternative visual way that data frames can be visualized. So this is in addition to the typical tables representation that pandas show. We also displace different tabs of visualizations that a user can browse through. And this is all done without the need for writing a single line of code. So users can very easily kind of toggle back and forth between the table and the visualizations, which usually displays different perspectives on your data. And so let's say that you might have a question or a hypothesis about your data, but you don't exactly know how to specify this in a form of a visualization. Now, Lux features this powerful and rich intent language that allows users to specify their analysis to Lux in a very sloppy manner. And then Lux automatically infers these specification details and determines the appropriate visualization mappings. And so we can see an example of this in this screen. So what we could do is essentially set an intent. And so here we're interested in the acceleration and horsepower in a particular data set. These are the two attributes of the columns that we're interested in. And Lux essentially displays all the visualizations that are relevant to the user's analysis based on that. And the intent is also a way to provide information about what you're interested in seeing in the data exactly. So the intent is a very quick and dirty way that you can start to visualize your data without having to think about what the visualization should look like or write a lot of code corresponding to it. So it becomes an easy way to look at either a single visualization or a collection of multiple visualizations. So finally, Lux is an open source project that we've been developing for over a year, and we're actively working with data scientists on making this tool more useful. So if you're interested, please give it a try at one of these links, or feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. So we now have Christina Chen, Radhika Satapathy, and Leslie Matheson.
Awesome. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So hi, everyone. We're so excited to be a part of WIDS Berkeley 2021. Our project, Women Rising, Trends, Impacts, and Challenges, is our data visualization final project. We felt WIDS is a perfect opportunity to share this project and to celebrate Women's History Month this month. So we're all Master in Information and Data Science students at Berkeley. Leslie joined spring of 2020 and is a successful business executive. Radhika joined fall 2018 and is about to graduate and will be re-entering her career after a 15-year break. And I am Christina. I joined summer 2020, and I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. So our motivation for this project, Women Rising, is to create a visualization that clearly communicates and demonstrates women leadership in the workforce, as well as illustrate the gender gap in the US and globally. We explored factors that were influencing progress and try to reach a broad audience of stakeholders to understand the efforts. And in terms of data, we started with US data, but discovered it was limiting and inadequate. So we turned to the OECD, Organization for Economic and Community Development. It is an organization set to shape policies and foster prosperity, opportunity, and well-being for all. They contribute to the G7 discussions and support other prominent policymakers throughout the world. And second is the WGEA, the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. They work with private sectors and enterprises to collect data from all businesses with more than 100 staff members operating in Australia. The third is Catalyst data that contained information on women S&P 500 CEOs. And lastly, we filled the gaps in any US data set by scraping publications such as Inc. and Fortune magazine. So let's jump into the website and some visualizations. So we ultimately created 20 visualizations, and I'll only highlight a few insights here. So in the US, women make up 43% of the full-time workforce. Oh no, it refreshed. Okay, sorry, technical difficulty. Oh, there we go. Yep, so US women make up 43% of the global workforce, as you can see in the bottom bar here. However, they comprise of 32% of the leadership, as you can see here in the left bubble, compared to 68% of men. And if you actually look at progress throughout the past decades, US is actually, in terms of women in board positions, are only 23%. So it's this really steep decline from 43% of the workforce to 23% of board positions. Let's look at the gender gap. So in terms of, at a high level view, we can see here that employment rate of women, if anyone knows how to stop Tableau refresh, that'd be great. So in terms of gender gap, the employment of women is distinctly lower than that of men across the world, except for 5 countries. And that's only been in the past 3 years. Iceland was one of the first countries to have larger proportions of women in the workforce. And when it comes to promotion opportunity, so in Germany, there are only 2 women for every 12 men promoted. And for the US, there are only 8 women for every 12 men promoted. So that's some numbers for us in terms of the gender gap. Next, we evaluated many influencing factors such as working hours, personal time, motherhood, childhood expenditure, and found that there is a positive relationship between maternity leave and job security, childcare support, greater work-life balance, and just more female leadership in general. And comparing with many EU nations, they outperform the US. So here's the US at the bottom with 0 maternity leave. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to explore and learn from. And then the last viz I want to show you is S&P 500 women CEOs. So out of the 500 companies, there are only 33 women CEOs, and that's only 7%. And so we wanted to dive into different attributes of these women and see if there's a determinant in what made them successful. And it might take a while to reload here. Awesome. And so I won't dive into it, but each CEO is pretty much divided into 4 different sections. Their company, their composition, so how many of their employees are female, their company revenue, their education from bachelor's all the way to doctorate in blue, and their working years and how many of those working years are company tenure or CEO tenure. Cool, and so this wraps up our lightning talk. Our goal was to create awareness. So first in our user research and now all of you at Berkeley, so thank you for listening. And we wanted to take action. So in the future, hoping to iterate on industry specific or even company specific data. And we hope that everyone can incorporate these insights into our daily working lives and work to build an inclusive culture. Thank you.
And now Madie Taher.
Yes, hello everyone. Let me share my screen. So can you see my screen? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I'm a team member for one of the Master in Data Science project. And today I will present our final project called Irrigation Detection Ablation Study Toward Green AI. So what are the problems that we basically face and why is our solution basically address these problems? So in recent progress, we see a lot of machine learning project, large neural networks that gain notable accuracy and other metrics. But despite the fact that this improving this model accuracy, the focus on just single metrics ignores the economic, environmental, and social cost of reaching the reported result. For example, as one of the basically person mentioned about the carbon footprint of cloud computing. And also from the agricultural perspective, irrigation detection can enable different areas like food security, climate and weather modeling, water rights, and public policy. But it's very resource intensive because training the machine learning model using the satellite images costs a lot. And why we choose to do the ablation study, we want to understand the effect of each band on performance metrics. And I will talk about the bands in satellite images in a minute. So we want to shift the balance toward green AI, and we use deep learning as a model to basically use the remote sensing using the satellite images with just a small number of the band. And in a nutshell, I would say that ablation via hamburgers. So assume that you have a baseline, you have a lot of like features and bands. And then from the experimental, you want to basically design experiments. So we have like, we try to remove each and then see the effect of the one of the element on the other metrics that we have, like accuracy and loss. So our project goal is to better understand the causality in machine learning and loss of performance. And also we want to open the door to other researchers related to the green AI and using the machine learning in production. So what was our data set? We use Big EarthNet dataset. It has more than 500,000 Sentinel-2 images. As you can see in the image below, you have like lands, you have actually oceans, some of them are oceans, mountains. And what we do actually is we use this Big EarthNet data to indicate whether this land is irrigated or not. And out of like 43 labels, we converted into labels whether it's agriculture versus non-agriculture. And what can bands do for us? So there are 12 bands. Some of them actually indicator of vegetation density, some of them indicator of the crop health, and some of them basically mixture of both. Some of them are moisture index. So some of them actually give us more information than RGB. So how we design an ablation process, we start with a baseline. So we establish our first round by just using the RGB bands. And then for the second round, based off the metric, we created a baseline. And then we establish a hypothesis. For example, if we remove the RGB bands from the model, how accuracy and loss function will change. And then after forming a hypothesis, we try to remove or add basically some of the bands in the same set of infrastructure and same hyperparameters. And then we evaluate the metrics and then start basically going through the round. And then we did 3 set of experiments. Probably I don't have time to go through each of them. So I just share with you a few of them. And for our experiment design, we train on all Big EarthNet data, and we use a custom data generator, and we control for epochs and resolution. We also use ResNet 50 as our baseline. It's actually one of the very famous machine learning model. So first round, we start with the RGB and coastal aerosol and vegetation red age. And then we create actually based on the first round, we create a set of other experiments. So at the end, I just want to share with you the conclusion that we find that vegetation red age and shortwave infrared matter most in terms of accuracy and then loss. And thank you. You can also find our code in this GitHub location.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And then for our last talk, I'm going to be presenting on behalf of Sifat. So let me share my screen. Okay, we have a recording here. So, all right, hopefully that looks good to folks, and I will get this started.
I'm Dr. Sifat Moin. I'm a structural engineer by training and a researcher by passion and by choice. I completed my PhD in civil and environmental engineering from UC Berkeley. And during my PhD, I developed a structural component framework that combines data science and structural engineering philosophies. Today, I'll present that study. So imagine you're driving towards the Bay Bridge and an earthquake strikes, and you see the bridge shaking vigorously like this. You would want to know whether it's safe or not to drive on the bridge, right? We thought so. But the current way for you or any stakeholders to learn about the condition of the bridge is for a structural engineer to visit and assess in person. In the meantime, the traffic network faces delays and safety risks. The same is true for buildings. So when occupants of a building experience strong shaking, They immediately want to know if the building is damaged or not. If there is no damage, they can resume operation. If there's damage, they can plan proper response as soon as possible. So I decided to use the current advances in remote sensing, computing technologies, and data science to develop a framework that can assess damage in near real time, and as a result, decisions can be made very rapidly. I call this framework the Human-Machine Collaboration Framework. In this framework, a domain expert, that is the structural engineer, and the machine, they work together to complete the task of damage assessment. So it starts with a structure that is instrumented with sensors and has some previously recorded data. This recorded data are used by the data science tools to extract some features and then develop the machine learning model. At the same time, the structural engineer develops the physics-based model. These two models, the machine learning model and the analytical models, are developed before the earthquake. So when the earthquake happens, the sensor records the responses, and the machine learning model and the analytical model together is used to give a decision on damage detection and the level of damage. Once this information is relayed, decision can be made about complete assessment or resumption of operation. And the annotated information can be stored in the database to update the machine learning model so that it is ready for the next earthquake. So for seismic structural health monitoring, one challenge is we only have data from undamaged structure, but we want to detect damage. So it is the problem of 1+ classification, and I use novelty detection as the algorithm. So in this algorithm, a model is developed, the model of novelty, using the data from available class, and a novelty score is assigned to each new data. If the score is higher than a threshold, then it's a novelty. So this is the M of the HMC framework. The H of the HMC framework is the structural engineer who develops the physics-based model. And from there, responses are computed. And the damage probability envelope, that is called the POE envelope, is developed. So in this envelope, if the new data is in the low probability region, the lighter region, it is the low probability of damage. And if it's on the darker region, it has high probability of damage. So this is the framework, and we applied it in instrumented buildings. So there were undamaged and damaged samples. In the undamaged sample, you see none of the responses are in the darker region. So these are examples of buildings that face damage in some events. The framework also correctly detected the events that face damage with this red cross mark labeled. So 100% accuracy here. Next, we applied this framework on a bridge, actually on a model of the bridge, and ran a lot of simulation and used data from those simulations to detect damage. And we found out that the HMC framework can detect damage with an average accuracy of 98%. Compared to using only machine learning model, there is an 8% improvement. The results also show that the HMC framework is able to eliminate a lot of misclassification, as you can see in the confusion matrix here. In conclusion, I'd like to say that the HMC framework efficiently combines data science and structural engineering philosophies and shows that such combination can be a reliable solution for problems that arise in civil engineering fields. With that, I'll end my talk, and I'd like to acknowledge the support from my supervisor and the group, and also from the funding agency. Thank you.
Excellent. So big thanks to all of our lightning talk presenters. I do want to give, a special thanks to keeping it to time. I know it's very challenging to condense a lot of these complex projects to 5 minutes. So shout out to you all for doing that. And that's awesome to see. And also for very creatively communicating some of the processes. So I really appreciate that. So we have more than enough time for questions, which is excellent. And we have a couple that have come in. So let me read those off. And some of them have been answered in the chat. So thank you for that. But if you could just take a second, I'll read them off again. If the specific presenter could take a second and just sort of repeat their answer, that would be awesome for the audience. So the first question is for Lauren. So Lauren, is your Bitcoin platform available now? And if so, where can we find it? So I know you answered this in chat, but yeah, if you don't mind saying a little bit more.
Yeah, so our project is basically running through the end of the semester. So it's not completed yet, but it should be completed toward the end of April. I dropped a link in the chat to basically a project from a previous semester that's sort of similar. That's what in my presentation, the photos of the dashboards, it's going to be that project. You just have to create a free account with your email, I think, to view it. But if anybody is interested in like learning how to access our final product, if you want to just like at me in the chat or something with your email address, then I can definitely connect with you and make sure that I send you the details of that once they're available.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Awesome. So the next question we have for Narissa is, you mentioned a slide, or in a particular slide, a class that was useful background knowledge for your work. Can you say a little bit more about that class or other areas to get more information about what your project is on?
Yeah, sorry. So that that class is the causal inference with Maya Peterson. So she's a biostatistician in the School of Public Health. And she, I believe, teaches the 2-part series on causal inference. So yeah, so it's sort of a lot of it, part of it is she does go over different like machine learning algorithms, but I think the emphasis is more on the structure around the prediction algorithm. And so how you can use those algorithms to estimate a statistical parameter and how you can sort of make that link between yeah, like what you're trying to estimate, which I hopefully came through in the talk.
No, that was great. Yeah, thank you for that. You know, shouting out classes on campus that can help with more information. That was awesome. That was great. Thanks. All right, so let's see. Again, this was a question that was asked in the chat, but Katie, if you don't mind saying a little bit more. So Catherine, I love your project about protecting ownership of Indigenous trademarks. How are you using this to make change? Can we help in any way?
Yeah, so basically a lot of it was taking the data from the government website and putting into spreadsheets and analyzing it. But my project manager practices law, so she's on a case right now. So she wants us to prove basically that it is unequally distributed in the owners of Indigenous trademarks. So hopefully once we finish the data and finish our conclusions, she can take that to her case and battle it out in court. But yeah, basically we wanted to just get this issue out there. And I know a lot of people kind of do know about it because of the Redskins, and Aunt Jemima is recently changing their name, which is awesome. But yeah, we just want to tell people that you can actually make a difference with data science, not just analyzing. So I thought that was cool.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing those extra details. Nice to see sort of an immediate way that's going to make an impact. So very cool.
Thank you.
Hi. We have a question for Christina on the Women Rising project. So very awesome. Can you say a bit more about next steps for this work? Any other groups you hope to collaborate with? Or yeah, any other next steps you'd like to share?
Hi, yeah, absolutely. So this was our project for the fall 2020 semester for W209. I worked with Radhika and Leslie on this. And we didn't get a lot of company specific data or, you know, looking at specific industries. We really wanted to dive into industry details, but we weren't able to get that data. So hopefully, you know, in the future, we are able to get that data and work on it. I'm sure Radhika has a lot more to say too, so feel free to jump in.
Yes, if I might quickly add, I think what started off as an investigation to assess what this distribution was like in the US, we soon discovered that there was very little data. So that's what prompted us to go to Europe and Australia. And in terms of next steps, I think we spoke to a variety of stakeholders through our experiment. We spoke to HR professionals, we spoke to diversity and inclusion leaders, we talked to VPs and C-level executives who are at the helm of implementing you know, policies and programs that would include more women in senior positions and on their projects, and even fresh graduates and students who are aspiring for senior roles and have ambitious plans of what they want to do. And so what we discovered is we lack a platform that actually brings all this data together. So the first step to even estimating how big this problem is, and even before we go on to designing programs, is to get a good lay of the land. And what this project enabled us to do is take a first shot at, let's take what we have available and let's look at it in different ways and see if this is of something of interest to the stakeholders. And we got a very good, tremendous response, because it does seem like industry wants to take it forward. Obviously, women as stakeholders definitely want to see it move forward. And, newer organizations want to build up with taking this with this perspective. So in terms of next steps, I think it would be working with each of these individual stakeholders and seeing what kind of data they're interested in seeing, and how we can make this, we can collect this data and make it transparent and share it with everybody. So that would be a big next step for us.
Great, thank you both. That's awesome. Sounds like great work. The next question I have is for Madhye. So were you inspired by any iSchool classes during your Green AI project?
Yeah, I would say actually one of the instructor was very inspiring me in terms of the social responsibility and climate change. So then I started reading about it, and that's where it started out.
Awesome. And I know we had another one that came up in terms of, you mentioned that you weren't able to really get into any details about some of the experiments that you ran. So is there anything else you'd want to add on those, any of those in particular?
Yeah, actually, we continue actually doing our experiment after the project, basically for the class stop. So we found that even with one band, we can get a very similar accuracy and loss. So that was pretty neat, basically finding. And we're going to publish our paper soon.
Oh, congratulations. Do you know where exactly yet?
Probably at NeurIPS, probably soon. Yeah, in the next batch.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So those are the questions that came in as the speakers were talking. Are there other questions that folks in the audience have for our speakers today? Feel free if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask if that's easier.
Hi, I have a question actually for Narissa. If you could speak a little bit to any challenges you faced in kind of, I know you didn't go super into depth into how that causal inference worked and how you took the kind of past observational data and treated it as if it was randomized. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about any of the more technical aspects of that.
Yeah, I'm super excited to do that. Can I share my screen again, maybe? Hold on one second. Oh, it says screen sharing is disabled. That's
Hang
okay.
on one second, I'll get that for you.
So, okay, so yeah. Does the phrase, I was also not sure like how much to go into detail in the talk, right? But does the phrase, like weighting in general, the idea of weighting and weighting observations makes sense to everyone, right? And so the technique was, it's called marginal structural modeling, but like aside from that, the idea of like weighting is used in inverse probability of treatment weighting, which is like something that I think people may or may not have heard of at some point. And so the idea is that you essentially re-weight your data based on the probability of exposure given the host of covariates that you do have available. And so that's kind of a way, and then yeah, you eventually like put that into a model. But the idea of that generally is that by reweighting it, we're able to sort of like emulate what like would have happened otherwise. Yeah, I think it's hard to, I would say that like things that I would like look up after this talk if you were interested in like learning more about it would be like inverse probability of treatment weighting and how that works. And then that's used in a broader like marginal structural model, which is like another layer of it because when you're using time varying covariates in longitudinal data, the probability of being treated or not being treated changes over time based on other factors. So in our example, we had hypertensive women, right? And so whether or not you're treated in one time point versus another time point will change dependent on your blood pressure levels and like how that's varying over time, right? And so that kind of like is this other layer of complication. And so marginal structural modeling is something that can help with that. But yeah, so those would be like the two things that I would say if you're interested in learning more about that you could look up. And then the other, I guess, aspect of that is that we estimated the weighting using a machine learning ensemble learner called SuperLearner, which is something that is used a lot in the lab that I work in. And it basically, it uses a bunch of different learners and then will optimize for a loss function and take like the most useful ones essentially. How is this different from quasi-expert? I mean, it is a quasi-experimental design, but I guess what's different about it is this idea of in causal inference, like what makes it different is that you're like being very, you are being very like upfront about like what you want to estimate and how capable you are or not of estimating it. It's essentially a framework for doing exactly what we're doing, which is a quasi-experimental study, right? But it's a way of thinking about it like, if I were to design a trial, what would that trial look like? What would be my treatment group? What would be my untreated group? What would I want the arms of my trial to look like? And then how can I like connect that with the data that I have? How can I estimate that with a statistical parameter? How good is that statistical parameter at estimating what I actually want to estimate? Yeah, does that make sense? How do you evaluate the results? So in what way? So I will say like, so in the example of like any time you're using like observational data, there is the potential for uncontrolled confounding, right? Unmeasured and therefore uncontrolled confounding. So is there something that we're not measuring in the data that's happening that's affecting both the exposure status and the outcome, right? And that's like kind of the big like worry with observational data in general, right? So there's no like perfect way of doing that, but I think that we did a pretty good job given the data that we had. So we had like all of the electronic medical records at Kaiser, so we adjusted for a host of covariates. So like not to go into too much detail, but like obviously like education, income, age, let's see, parity, so a lot of like demographics and then also like comorbidities. So do they have CVD? Do they have diabetes? Do they have all of these different like, yeah, comorbid conditions? But yeah, I would say that in terms of like the weighting, you can look at like how dispersed the weights are, like without getting too technical. Like if they're really dispersed, then you like it's like harder to like make inference about it because you don't have as much like support. So you might need to like truncate them. So that would be a way of looking at like how good you are at being able to reweight the data in terms of the weighting itself. Yeah, I'll stop because I feel like I'm taking up a lot of airspace, but definitely please message me. I'm excited about this kind of work and would love to talk to you.
No, thank you, Nerissa, for taking the time to, yeah, explain some of that more and, suggest things that folks can look up after if they want more detail. So we do have a question that came in for Doris. So can your platform handle high dimensional visualization?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Lux is designed to handle data frames with large numbers of columns as well as like large numbers of rows. So what we essentially do is something like a for loop where we're like iterating through all the possible columns and we're displaying the ones that have some sort of interesting statistical properties. For example, something with a very high correlation or maybe something with a very high skewness. So all of these are either recommended by the system by default or something that the users can come in and specify programmatically. So we're really excited about how this can help people visualize high dimensional data.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I do see we're nearing time. We do have a question that came in the chat. So it's a sort of a general question, I think, out to the group. I am a civil engineer, completed my master's in civil engineering. I am totally new to data science, but I am curious about the data science field and wishing to pursue a master's at the Berkeley High School. How would it be beneficial for me being a civil engineer? So if there's anyone in the audience who wants to offer advice or can speak to that, it'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from the MIDS, basically Master of Information and Data Science. So I would say that if you are undergraduate in Berkeley, you can actually, there is a program called 5th year. So you can actually get your MIDS in 1 year. So maybe you can explore that option as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Anything else that folks want to add? And Madhya, if there's a link to that, would you mind dropping that in the chat for?
Yeah, so Sifat here. So I'm a civil engineer. So I'd like to point out that there are a lot of possibility of opportunities to research in data science. So civil engineering is kind of a traditional field where people are more tuned into doing normal design and normal, old-fashioned way of doing the maintenance and those kind of stuff. So there are a lot of opportunities to explore data science and bring in the machine learning tools. For example, so currently I'm doing my postdoc at PEER, which is Pacific Earthquake Engineering Research Center. It is in UC Berkeley. And here we are using different ways of using the data science tool, like visual detection, and then for damage. And then in the construction industry, they're trying to use data science tools to make sure that everything is going as planned visually. And then what I'm doing is I'm using different vibration data to make sure that all the buildings are performing as they should. So there are a lot of opportunities in civil engineering. I'm just saying about structural engineering though. So in civil engineering, there is transportation. They're using a lot of different tools of data science for their purpose. So yes, so definitely if you are interested to use data science in your research, please do. And if you want to check more about what we are doing in our group, there is our lab is steellabs.berkeley.edu. I'll put down the link here in the chat. You can check out what we are doing, and and also you can talk to me if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is great. So we are at time. I'm going to share my screen one last time so we can get the dates of the event up. Thank you. A big round of applause to our presenters, Debbie for kicking us off, and then all of our lightning talks. Really inspiring, really awesome. I also totally neglected to give a shout out to Viviana and Sophia, who have been helping us in the chat and holding it down in general as we manage participants during this session. So big thanks to them as well. Please join us tomorrow. We have sort of our last Berkeley centered day. We're focusing on networking, and we have a great conversation that Liliana and Liza will be facilitating with Rediet Abebe, and really some great breakout room activities. So we hope to see you all tomorrow back here. Thank you all so much. Have a good day.